The place where the Green Bay Packers offense can take the biggest step forward in 2024 may not be where you think.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. When we talk about the improvement of this Green Bay Packers offense, we are usually talking about Jordan Love and the growth of Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom on the offensive line, and maybe Jordan Morgan can give them an improvement at right guard. And what we have not talked about is perhaps the #1 reason, or at least the #1 area where they can take a step forward. The reason the Packers were an elite offense last year is the passing game. Passing is something that teams, the Packers, do more often, and it generates more value. It is just the more important thing. Period. End of story. And we have good data on the play action game. You can run an effective play action game without an effective run game. It's about making the defense believe you could be running in that scenario, about marrying the run and the pass concepts so that the play fake and the scenarios, the defense believes you could be running. But the thing is, the place where you can most improve tends to be the place where you were worse. And the Packers were a materially worse running team last year than they were throwing the ball. And that was not supposed to be the way this offense looked. This was supposed to be a team that was built around a foundational running game. And then Jordan Love can play action pass, take his deep shots, have a little variance in his game, and the defense, and you can win 17-14 games. Well, none of those things happened, really, except the play-action shot game. It was the Jordan Love piece of the equation. And that's still the wrong way to have looked at it, because Jordan Love ended up having to be really good for this team to reach its ultimate ceiling, because the running game failed them and the defense failed them. Last year, the Packers' running game, 15th in DVOA, an average run game. You've heard these splits before. The Packers week 1 through 9. So in the cohort that we're normally talking about with Jordan Love, where the offense was not nearly as good, they were 19th in EPA per rush. They were 10th in success rate. Part of that is A.J. Dillon. If you can run for 4 or 5 yards, you can create successful plays, but you're not creating a ton of value overall. That's the EPA per play number. But rushing from week 10 on, aka when Aaron Jones was healthy and in the playoffs, 5th in EPA per play, 6th in success rate. This is when they were a top 3 offense and arguably the best offense in the league over the second half of the season. This is why you go out and you sign Josh Jacobs. This is why you use a top 100 pick on Marshawn Lloyd. This is frankly why you bring back A.J. Dillon. Because this running game, you'd like to have a backstop. So if Josh Jacobs gets hurt, you don't necessarily have to be relying on a rookie, which right now, if you had to rely on a rookie, you'd be in big trouble because Marshawn Lloyd has not been able to stay on the field. Now, his upside is considerable. And you heard Jim Nagy on this show, if you're an everydayer, say he's the best running back in the draft. Daniel Jeremiah said on the NFL Network broadcast, he's the best running back in the draft. The Packers drafted the guy that a lot of smart people and evaluators think is the best running back in the draft. We haven't had a chance to really see him show that. So you have the backstop with A.J. Dillon and Emmanuel Wilson, but then you go out and you get a running back who can be a really high-level player who just 2 years ago led the NFL in rushing, was the best running back in the league. Now, there were reasons last year the game did not translate. Running backs after heavy carry seasons also tend to regress. There is a wear and tear factor on the body of these running backs, but this is an offense now where, yes, Aaron Jones is a really good running back, but in the second half of the season, teams could not play the Packers the same kind of way. You couldn't play the Packers with a single high safety in the second half of the season. They were going to throw it on your head. And when you play these light boxes against the Packers, they're capable of playing, especially now, in 2 tight ends, getting heavy personnel. We've been seeing more A.J. Dillon as a blocker and 21 personnel running these run concepts where you've got A.J. Dillon kind of like a fullback. Zach Cruz mentioned, the late second coming of Dorsey Levens, who was sort of a fullback turned halfback and feature back in the Packers offense. But with Edgar Bennett was more the halfback, and they ran a lot of those pro sets where you got 2 backs on the field. A.J. Dillon, if he shows a willingness to block, okay, you can see a lot of that, but the Packers have better answers now for too high in the run game than they did last year. And this was part of the problem in 2022 and even 2021. The Packers could not consistently punish teams for playing with 2 deep safeties. They had to win with the passing game in those situations. And that works when you have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. The Packers have Jordan Love, but they don't have Devontae Adams. And it's just a different version of this team now. Now they can play big like the 49ers against these 2 shell teams. They can play big with 2 tight ends against someone that wants to have that second safety back. And that creates a variability in the way that they can attack defenses that they just didn't have last year for most of the season, because when it was A.J. Dillon back there, no one was really afraid of what they were going to do. And the offensive line as a run blocking unit was just not as good. So you hope year 2 with Rasheed Walker as the starter, year 3 in the NFL, that is something that improves. You hope Zach Tom, year 2 as a starter, that there's not a lot of training camp rust, that he gives you a little bit more. And you hope that Jordan Morgan, if he's your right guard, that he comes in and he's a perfect fit in this run game for the Packers, that he can be an upgrade over John Runyan Jr., who was a good pass protector, but the run game was where he lacked a little bit. It's where when you had Sean Ryan, I mean, when you look at these 4-minute offenses that the Packers were playing at the end of the season when they were winning these games, it was Sean Ryan on the field. Well, if Sean Ryan has to play, he's a good run blocker. So you're giving yourselves more opportunities. I said a couple weeks ago, this is going to be the best opportunity that Josh Jacobs has ever had to run the ball. The best quarterback he will have ever played with. The best passing offense he will have ever played with. And that lightens the burden on him to carry the offense, keeps him fresher, potentially keeps him healthier, and he can rip off the runs that made him so effective back 2 years ago when he was the best running back in the league. And it's not just the 40 and the 50-yard runs, it's the 10s, it's the 15s, it's the 20s. And when A.J. Dillon was the only guy really getting touches for the Packers last year, they were not getting enough explosive runs. It's why they need something from Marshawn Lloyd. But Josh Jacobs can give them that. Even if it's not the 40-yard runs, he can give them the 12s, the 18s, the 25s. And that gives you an explosive element that your offense really needs if you want to be the number 1 offense in the league, which I've said I think they can be if they're healthy. So there was this debate. Dan Orlovsky started it, spilled over onto the X machine, and it was about how you rank the pass catchers in the NFC North. It's trickier than you might think. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day. did leg day yesterday. Maybe it's you want to make sure that you're always getting that morning coffee, that's your indulgence in the morning. You got to have it, and it makes you feel good. You enjoy it. Well, when you have a schedule packed with kids' activities and big work projects and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Sometimes it can be as easy as, let me just have a minute to myself and have this cup of coffee and enjoy it and have a book. I was doing that for a while. I was having 20 minutes in the morning just for myself with my coffee and a book. And you know what? It was wonderful. Therapy can help you find your non-negotiables, the things that your life can be that find you those moments to reset, to recharge. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, convenient, and suited to your schedule. Never skip your non-negotiables, your leg day, your coffee, and your book. And BetterHelp can help you find those non-negotiables, or can even be a non-negotiable for you. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This discussion about the NFC North pass catchers is an interesting one. Because at first, we just saw the rankings independent of any context. And then Dan Orlovsky went on to say, look, I wanted 5 players. That was his cutoff. And I wanted them all to be above average and included tight ends. And he said he had the Packers number 1. He also said Justin Jefferson counts as 2. That's how good he is. And so this makes this interesting. Okay. How many of these teams actually have 5 or more above average players at any of those pass catching positions? And I thought, if the number is 5, the Packers might be the only team that has 5. The Bears, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are probably better than any 2 receivers the Packers have, and we'll see about Rome Odunze. But after that, they do not have even average players. I think Cole Kmet is bang on average. And none of their other receivers are even worth talking about here. So even if I give you Cole Kmet and Rome Odunze, you're at 4. Okay? The Vikings. Justin Jefferson, of course. Jordan Addison. Now, Jordan Addison is an interesting one. I got some Vikings fans riled up when I said, tell me why Jordan Addison was better last year than Jaden Reed when Jaden Reed beat him in Pro Football Focus, total grade, receiving grade, in yard after catch per reception, in yard per route run, and passer rating when targeted. Addison played 200 more snaps and outgained Reed by barely 100 yards. Also, it's the case that 18% of Jordan Addison's targets came versus man coverage. Almost 28% of Jaden Reed's coverage came against man coverage, and Jaden had better grades and yards per route run against man. Jaden Reed, despite not having as many yards or receiving touchdowns as Jordan Addison, but he did score 10 total touchdowns, was the better player and carried the better offense. So, but Jordan Addison is an above average receiver. But what about after that? And now he's hurt. We don't know what the future of Jordan Addison is going to be. That's not part of the exercise, but it's useful context here. TJ Hawkinson, of course, is an above average tight end. So you named 3 players. Okay. The Lions, they have 2. I said, I don't care what the criteria is. The Lions are last. And Lions fans, they don't like it when you say that. They go, oh, Khalif Raymond, like, be serious. Jameson Williams, be serious. We've had the Jameson Williams discussion on the show. Until you be about it, don't talk about it. I know that's not the phrase, but that's going to be the phrase with Jameson Williams, because we need to see it a little before we can believe it. Amon-Ra St. Brown is incredible. Sam Laporta had an incredible rookie season. Those 2 guys are great. Those 2 guys, are as good as after Justin Jefferson, they might be the 2 best pass catchers in the NFC North. But they don't have anyone after that. So, okay. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. I think those guys are all above average players. And I don't know where Luke Musgrave or Tucker Kraft rank in the NFL hierarchy. Are there 16 tight ends better than those guys? I honestly don't know. I haven't like really dug into it to be like, okay, like let me compare Evan Ingram and his man coverage stats. Like I normally don't care about those kinds of things, even if you say they're not. I think that's debatable. They could be this year. It's an interesting discussion here. You could make the case the Bears have the best pass catching group by Dan Orlovsky's criteria, depending on what you think of these tight ends, these Packers tight ends. If you think one of Luke Musgrave or Tucker Kraft is above average, though, then I think the line switches. And I think if you really wanted to have some fun, like I've said before, I think Bo Melton's an NFL player. I think Grant DuBose is an NFL player. No, are they above average NFL players? No. Like, let's not go crazy. Not yet. Maybe can they be? Sure. But are they right now? No, they're not. If you look at the Pro Football Focus grades from last year, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave right next to each other, 23 and 24 among players who played at least 20% of their team snaps. And there's not really sample size guys that you got to take out because they played in terms of targets, got the smallest share of targets of any of the guys ahead of them. So I don't think at the moment you can say they are above average tight ends. Do I think they can be? Yes. But they aren't right now. So I think the answer truly is that the Bears have the best pass catching group in this division. I think that's real. I think that's true. And then the question is, what do you value more, the depth of the Packers or the high-end talent? TJ Hawkinson is one of the 3 to 5 best tight ends in the league. Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the league or the second best receiver in the league. And then, after that, we can have discussions. The Packers do not have anyone as good as Justin Jefferson, not close. And I don't know that they have anyone as good as TJ Hawkinson relative to his peers, because again, he's a top 5 player. Do they have guys that can impact the game more than TJ Hawkinson? I think you can make the case that they do. It's tough. I think the Bears are first. I think the Lions are last, and then there's wiggle room in between. I think this depends on Christian Watson. Is he healthy? Does Wicks take that step forward? Does one of these tight ends play to their ability? Those are question marks. Now, they have guys who have shown more. Their wide receiver 3, 4, 5, and 6 have shown more than any of these other teams. Their tight end 2 has shown more than any of these guys on these other teams in terms of what they can be, what their potential is, and where they can go. So if you're going to make the case for Green Bay being higher than 3, it's based on the growth potential here. Ross Uglum from Packer Report said he thinks both Wicks and Reed are better than Jordan Addison. Okay, I agree. But Justin Jefferson, how do you account for that? Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, like where do they slot in? It's a harder exercise than I initially thought it was going to be. I struggle with it. I really do. I struggle with it. I think I would take the Packers group of pass catchers over the Vikings group of pass catchers because the Vikings group is just so fragile. When Justin Jefferson isn't out there, it is so devastating. And that's hard to say because he's such a good player when he is out there. But the Packers' fragility is just not there. And I think there's value in that. I think there's a lot of value in that. Let's flip sides of the ball here and talk about defense. I want to talk about Lucas Van Ness to close today's show here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love sports. I love it so much. I made it my job. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But we are now still weeks away from the NFL season starting. The WNBA is not back yet. The NBA is still a ways off into the future. We've got baseball, and that's about it. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. I opened the app today and mulled over the Panthers at 10-1 to win the NFC South. I'm glad I didn't pull the trigger on it. Falcons trade for Matthew Judon. I like that for them. I think that pushes them up a little bit more than I would like to admit. I'm more excited about them now than I was 24 hours ago. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers, speaking of getting excited, with a booster or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football. Go. Get out of here. Go do it. Well, in like 6 to 8 minutes. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find a link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I raved about Lucas Van Ness in our post-game live. And in real time, sometimes things can seem a certain way, and then after the fact, you go back and you go, maybe that wasn't as good as I realized or I thought in the moment. And I think this one qualifies. But here's the caveat. Lucas Van Ness is still raw. He is. But he won 30% of his pass rush reps, according to Pro Football Focus. That was still among the best in the preseason in week 1. He had 4 pressures. That was among the best in preseason in week 1. The Rashawn Gary comparison is the one that I've made in the past. And I thought as I was watching it of something Mike Smith, the old outside linebackers coach for the Packers, said of Rashawn Gary. And that was essentially, if you give me someone who is talented and cares about getting better, cares about playing hard, just cares, he said, gives a, you know what, then that's enough. I'll give you a good player. And Lucas Van Ness, with the tools that he has at his size, at 6'5", 270 plus, with this hulking frame and powerful stature and explosive traits, if he just plays really hard and stays healthy, he can be an impact player because he is hard to move off his spot in the run game, play disciplined, and even if he never improves his pass rush bag, he's going to go up against enough tight ends. He's going to sniff out enough bootlegs on the backside. He is going to run over enough backup offensive tackles, and he's going to create opportunities for teammates. My favorite pass rush rep of his was on a stunt where he goes from wide 9 all the way inside. The Packers had a double game on, and it created a pressure. And his ability to move at his size and change directions and take out blockers so that they can't get to pass offs and those kinds of things, that's valuable to the team. Now, from a top 15 pick, yes, you would like a top 10 kind of pass rusher. He's probably not going to be that this year, and he's not even going to get the chance to be because he's not starting. But think about Rashawn Gary in year 2 in 2020. It really wasn't until the end of the season, and this was after they said, okay, you're just going to play wide and come get the quarterback. There's not that much difference in how Rashawn Gary plays now. Like, Rashawn Gary does not have some deep bench of pass rush moves that he goes to. Like, he has moves. He's more refined now than he was when he came into college or came into the NFL from college. No question about that. But you can see Rashawn Gary is still a bull rush, speed rush guy. He's either going to try and rip and bend the edge, even though he's not super bendy. He can do it because he's so explosive. If he gets if he gets the offensive tackle on half his body and just gets underneath him a little bit, he can create enough force to bend the edge, or he's just going to run right through your face. That can be what Lucas Van Ness is. I said I would like for them to get a different kind of player. It's why I thought, hey, maybe throw a pick at Hassan Reddick. Now they were going to have to pay him a bunch of money, and we have reports now that certain teams hung up the phone when they called the Eagles because they talked to Reddick and they found out what he wanted to get paid, and they were like, we're not doing that. And maybe the Packers were one of those teams. I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers were one of those teams. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, even though he's still raw, he's so physically gifted and plays so hard and so disciplined most of the time anyway, that I still think he can be a good player right now today. If you needed him to start and you gave him a bunch of reps, I think he would just effort himself and talent himself into a handful of pressures every game. And this is a defense that suits him because he can just go attack. Now, I thought he looked more decisive. I still think that's true. The problem is decisiveness is not nuance. So just because you're decisive, and there was a rep where he was very undecisive. He was like, I kind of want to spin here. And then he was like, okay, how do I do that again? So you almost like felt him thinking on, okay, how do I position my body? Like it was a bizarre rep. But this is on the coaches now. I know he works hard in the off season. He's always working out and trying to get better. But this is a coaching thing now. Can the coaches maximize his ability? First of all, can you put him in the right positions to succeed? And second of all, can you find ways to improve his technique enough? Can you coach him up enough that you can get a player who's got enough refinement that he can win with some technique, with some nuance, but also still allowing him to just say, I can just go out talent some of these guys. Because Rashawn Gary still every once in a while can just out talent you. He can just be bigger, faster, stronger. And if you just let Lucas Van Ness be bigger, faster, stronger, he's going to have a couple pressures a game. He's just that much bigger, faster, and stronger than almost everyone else. And that's the exciting thing about him, is the potential is limitless. You would have liked to have seen more transformation in his bag. It's also the preseason. Maybe he's trying some new things. I'd like to have seen a little bit more of the trying. But like I said, it took Rashawn Gary until the end of his second season to really look like, oh my God, this guy could be really, really good. I think that gradual evolution with Lucas Van Ness is coming. I think he's going to get better. And again, players who are really talented, who really care about it, that is usually enough. Like guys who are really talented, by and large, flame out for two reasons. They get hurt or they don't care enough. They don't put in the work. They don't put in the film study. They don't do the training in the off season, and they never get better, and they never find their place, and they don't play hard, and they don't try hard, or some combination therein. And Lucas Van Ness does not seem to have any of those problems. So tell me why he's going to fail. I don't think he's going to fail. I think he's going to have an incredibly high floor. The question is, how does he reach the incredibly high ceiling that he also has? Like, that's the question. And I don't have an answer for that other than coaching. It's got to be the coaching. And I'm talking about the offseason coaching that he gets. He works with Eddie McGilvra, who's been on this program before. And who, by the way, works with Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt and other guys, Carl Brooks, I believe. And it's going to be the coaching on this team. This is a new coaching staff. What does your player development plan look like? What is your plan for Lucas Van Ness? How are you going to help him reach his potential? This is going to be on the coaching that he gets and the player, but the coaching that he gets to reach that potential. And I'm excited to see it. I am. Ian O'Connor, the author of the Aaron Rodgers book that I have right next to me, The Out of Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Fascinating conversation. I've already talked to Ian. In fact, I did a radio interview where I was so enthralled by the interview that I'm like repeating things from the interview ahead of time. We haven't even played the interview yet. That'll be tomorrow on Locked On Packers, and then we will be live Sunday night after the game. It's a night game. Is it my favorite thing that it's a night game, a preseason night game? Like, come on a Sunday. What are we doing? But we'll be live after the game doing what we do after the game, and it's going to be a fun time, so come hang out with us. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on all the social media platforms, Locked On Packers, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you find podcasts so you can stay Locked On Packers.